What's up, my friends? Welcome back to another video, and today we're talking about composition. So how to actually start and finish your piece of music. And I want to break this down into 5 simple steps today. Okay. I wanted to do this video because I think a lot of composers uh, have no problem coming up with the initial idea, maybe even fleshing it out into a motive. But after that, how do they actually develop it further? And what kind of framework can we actually follow to complete our piece of music? And so I kind of want to answer that question and give you a framework to follow today. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a lot of clarity and a lot of confidence going into every composition that you approach. So before we dive into those 5 steps, I want to give you a gift right off the bat, and this is my ideal composing workflow guide. It's totally free, and it goes over a 4-step framework to follow for every piece that I write. This is literally what I follow every single time when I'm writing a piece of music. And yeah, it'll walk through how to start from the initial idea all the way to the finalized master. It goes over specific arranging techniques to get the best out of your musical ideas, and finally, why mixing and mastering are so important. We'll define what those are and also talk about the differences between them as well. So it's a super practical guide that you can download right away and start reading. It's the first link in the description box below if you want to grab it. And again, it's my gift to you for checking out this video today. So without further ado, let's jump in. First of all, we have to realize that inspiration is really, really hard to quantify and nail down. You know, sometimes ideas just come on a whim, and it's really hard to pinpoint exactly why they work in a certain way. But it's just difficult to control when inspiration strikes. Like, some people have certain spaces they put themselves into to create these inspiration lightning strikes, but it's really hard to control overall when we're just, writing music, or maybe we're not feeling it, but suddenly we do. It comes in at random times, sometimes it feels like. And so, yeah, when it happens, we just need to get the ideas down before we forget them, of course, right? So important. So some may disagree with like extracting a framework from this process, but I think it makes it a lot easier to practice deliberately. So if we have a specific framework to follow to take us from our initial idea to the finished product, then it's a lot easier to practice, and we know exactly where to give ourselves these checkpoints and these goals along the way, right? And with any skill, improving at composing a song takes time, consistency, and repeated application. Okay, I think we know this, but to improve at anything, we just have to do it over and over again. So step number 1 is to establish the key, the tempo, and the meter. For me, this is what I always start with when I'm writing a piece of music. I always want to know what key I'm going to write it in. Is it going to be a major key or a minor key? Is it going to be starting in like a mode, for example, right? So like, what tonality do you want the piece to be in? Or do you want it to be just atonal altogether, right? Like, is there not going to be any key? You can really have a lot of flexibility there. Then thinking about the tempo, what speed do you want it to go? Do you want it to be fast and driving with a really consistent type of groove? Or do we want it more slower, rubato, and just less strict form overall? And in terms of the meter, what time signature are you going for, right? Is it going to be 6/8? Is it 4/4? Is it 3/4? Is it 5/8, right? So this rhythmic foundation can provide a solid base on top, or on which we can write on top of. Before we even write a single note, I think establishing these 3 aspects will give our piece a great template to build from. So this is step number 1, is making sure you nail down the key, the tempo, and the meter. Then I like to start with the melody, because if we have a strong melody, then honestly, I think the piece is just taken that much further, because then it can stand on its own. People can remember the melody, and it just puts the piece in a good direction from the start. So I think always melody is king. You can choose either the period or the sentence form, which will create a complete phrase. If you're not really sure of what these are, no worries, we'll go over it a little bit. But generally, a period is A, B, A, B. So if you have an antecedent phrase and you have a consequent phrase, it looks something like this. So you kind of have like a basic idea, then you contrast that idea on the second half of the phrase. Then that completes the question phrase or the antecedent. Then we move on to the consequent phrase, where the basic idea is repeated, and then we move on to the contrasting idea again, but this time it ends in a perfect cadence, so it wraps up the entire period in a very beautiful way. The other form is the sentence form, which is more like A, A, B, C. So C being like the cadence at the end, and it kind of looks like this. So you have the basic idea, which is kind of repeated again, but maybe with slight variation. And that's the first part of the phrase. Then the second half of the phrase, it's more of the development, right? Or the continuation, and then it ends with the cadence at the very end. So both of these forms can work very, very well, and I have pieces personally that follow both of these forms. But yeah, they're both very popular, and for Western music especially, they're very common. So in my opinion, establishing a melody first can hint at possible harmonies and rhythms as well. You don't just need to write a melody, but if you know what those notes are and you kind of have your key and your tempo established, then you kind of should be able to hear in your mind what kind of harmonies can accompany your main melody. It's really, really cool. And again, your melody should kind of have some built in structure and rhythm to it as well. So you can have some rhythmic variation in there. Then step number 3 is the harmony, the chord progression, right? So harmony provides the context to the melody. A melody can sound great on its own, but it's kind of lacking a little bit if it doesn't have that background to support it. So it can be as simple as just one chord, like the one chord repeated over and over, or to as many as you please, typically between like 4 to 8, I would say. But generally, 4 to 6 is a good option to start with. So 1, 5, 6, 4, 6, 4, 1, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, whatever it might be. Just having a sequence of chords that follows naturally is a great way to go after you've established your initial melody. So if your chord progression is diatonic, which means it just fits within the major or the minor key, I would try spicing it up with 3 different types of theoretical techniques. The first one is modal mixture, the second one is suspended chords or using extensions, and the third one is secondary dominance. So we won't dive into them too much in this video. I've done other content on this, but these are just 3 techniques that you can really use to spice up your chords, your chord progressions. And again, they're slightly more advanced, so just make sure you have a basic grasp of the major and the minor chords within the scales first. So that's step number 3 is harmony. Then step number 4 is form and structure, right? So rather than thinking about the length of the piece, because a lot of people think about how long should this piece be? Should it be under 3 minutes, over 5 minutes? I would think about the structure. So how many times do you want to hear the main theme? How many times do you want to hear a contrasting section? Things like that. So yeah, how many contrasting sections do you want in the piece to, complement your melody? So in my opinion, it's always a good idea to have a main theme first, followed by a development or a contrasting section that either has a different melody or no melody at all. That could work as well. So it gives the ear a little bit of a break. It doesn't have to focus on any specific melody. I personally like ABA a lot to start with. So it's a great form for beginners because it has a very natural structure, beginning, middle, and end. So it's like a main theme at the beginning, a bit of a development in the middle, and then a nice ending at the very end to wrap things up, but it brings back that main theme. Then you could expand this to AABA, for example. You repeat the main theme once. You have ABACA, so 2 contrasting sections, AABCADA, and so many more, right? So naturally, as you add more sections, the longer the piece is going to be. But think about how you want to structure your piece. That's going to be very important. So after you've established your key, tempo, and meter, you've established the main melodies, you've established the harmonies, then you want to actually lay out the framework for your piece of music. So here, by this point, you're basically done the composition. And then step number 5 is just to go back and, address the finer details and go through final checks. So when you're content with the overall composition, now is the best chance to go back and revisit any aspects that you might want to tweak. So are there any chords that you're not happy with? Maybe you want to add a few extra for interest and color. Is the melody not very engaging? So maybe you can tweak its rhythm a bit or add some passing tones to spice it up or some extra leaps. It really is completely up to you, but this is your chance to go back and make sure you fiddle with everything you want to before you commit, because it becomes difficult to tweak the composition when you're arranging and mixing and stuff, right? Because by that point, you should have already committed to the overall piece already. You don't want to be tweaking your music as you're doing those other musical phases, right? So let's just quickly recap and I'll share some final thoughts with you. First of all, just go with whatever workflow suits you. There's never a right or wrong here, but I just wanted to lay out this framework to give you a potential step-by-step method to follow, okay? There really is no right or wrong, and that's the beauty of the creative arts, is you can go through however you want to. I personally never really followed an exact framework, but when I was younger, I did study classical piano and classical theory, which did give me a solid foundation. So that's kind of what I'm sharing with you here. And ideally, if you want to get to the point where you can write the melody, harmony, and rhythm all at the same time, that's a great, great idea, because The melody itself, I think, should indicate the harmony and the rhythm as well. Of course, you can play around with different chord choices and things like that because multiple chords will work with the same melody. But in general, where you're coming up with my melodies and ideas and hooks, try to also think about the harmonic context as well. And that saves you not only time, but it just makes your workflow so much faster as well. And it's just a lot more fun to write that way, in my opinion. So go with your instincts, but always be open to trying something new. That's my biggest takeaway for you is, you can follow this framework, you can take what we've learned here today and apply it, but if you're not comfortable with something, then feel free to change it. Like go through whatever makes you comfortable and just don't be afraid to experiment because again, there's so many possibilities out there for you to try. And I would encourage you to continue doing that every single time you write a piece of music. Okay, so again, before you go, make sure you download the Ideal Composing Workflow. This will put everything into concrete form so you can download it and have it by your side whenever you want to write a piece of music. It goes over the 4-step framework to follow for every piece that I write, how to go from the initial idea all the way to the polished final master, specific arranging techniques to get the best out of our musical ideas, and finally, why mixing and mastering are so important and the differences between them. So it really is a start to finish look at how we can go from the initial idea, the initial hook or melody, to our completed product. And this is the method that I follow every single time. So I hope that's been helpful. Again, you can download it by clicking the first link in the box below, and you can keep it by your side whenever you're writing a piece of music, or if you just simply want a refresher, it's there for you as well. Okay? Thank you again for watching. I appreciate it. I'll catch you in the next video, and take care. Bye-bye.